Welcome back. We are still working with the Crowning Touch product from Vintage Market and Design, and we've got one last fun technique to show you in an area that you may not have even thought about using this for, and that is stenciling. Vintage Market and Design is coming out with some great stencil products. There will be a lot of different stencils available on their website. I've got one that's a little koi goldfish today that we're going to work with. There's also some great stencil tape that's a nice width. It's not so wide it's going to get in your way, and it's a low tack, so it's not going to pull your decorative surface off. There's nothing more frustrating than finishing your project and going to do the final step and pulling it off. So you don't have to worry about that with this tape. And so we're going to use just a little bit of this to hold our stencil in place. And I really like to make sure that my stencil's not moving around when I'm working on it, because that's when you get smudges and an outline that is not clean and crisp the way you want it. And last but not least, they have come out with these glorious stencil brushes that are nice and fat and big, so you can cover a large area with them, which if you're doing a wall and you're trying to do a faux wallpaper look or something like that, or you're doing a border, you want a big brush because you don't want to have it take longer than it needs to. And the bristles are kind of stiff too, which is also very good. You don't want too much give when you stencil, because you don't want your bristles working its way under the edges of your stencil. So this brush can stand up to it. One of the most important tips to remember when you are stenciling is to work with a dry brush. That means that we are going to be dipping into our Crowning Touch. Today we're going to use the cast iron, which is a really pretty deep gray-black color. And we're going to use the pearl as a highlight, which is just what it says, a beautiful shimmery white color. And I'm going to make sure that I don't have a really wet brush when I go onto my surface, because I don't want to have any bleeding underneath the edges of the stencil. And the best way to do that is to keep a really dry, not a damp, but a really dry terry cloth towel with you, and you're going to offload your brush all the time. So we'll start out with the dark color, and I'm dipping into this cast iron. I'm going to make sure that I've got it over the whole surface, not just on one edge. And then I'm going to take that and take most of it off, so that what's left on my brush is really just a residue. And then I like to work with this one in the center and work my way out. Oh, I may have offloaded that just a little bit too much. There we go. And you can always add more. That's the thing with stenciling. It's best to start out light and work your way up, because once you get it on there, you can't get it off. So start out light and work your way up. And you can get variations in shading on your stencils and some beautiful artistic effects by using a dry brush and working your colors into each other. And I always err on the side of taking too much off, because I don't want to end up with a big blob on my stencil. And if you still are worried about how much you've got on the brush, do a little bit of working on the solid part of the stencil and then work into your open area. I'm going to try and give this little koi some shading so he looks like he's got a bit of a three-dimensional look. A little bit on the edges. And the Crowning Touch has a nice thick quality to it, so it's not as likely to bleed underneath the stencil areas and cause some messiness that you don't want. I'm going to go for just a little bit more of that and add just a little bit more drama before I go to the pearl. So what you're doing is building the color. You don't want to get it all on there the first pass. You just do this when you're feeling patient and build the color so you get a nice soft effect. Okay, then because my brush is fairly dry, I'm just going to use the same brush. If you have two, that's great. I have one today. And I'm going to get that excess off. And then I'm going to use it to do my pearl. Same thing, I'm covering the entire brush and then offloading most of it. Got a little loose hair there. And then I'm going to go in and highlight the areas that I didn't put the zinc on. Or excuse me, the cast iron is what we're using today. And I would suspect that if you wanted to get a little bit more metallic look to this, you could even play with some of the French waxes that have metallic colors in different tones. If we wanted to add a little bit of brighter color to our koi. And every time I reach into the crowning touch, I'm then offloading the brush before I go to my stencil. So if you have a border, it's really nice to segue from one color into the other. If you've got a flower stencil, it's really nice to segue from one color into the other. It's just a more sophisticated way to do a stencil rather than to have it be all one color. If you feel uncomfortable with the way that your stencil's laying on the surface, if you've got a little bit of texture on the surface and it's not nice and glassy smooth like what I'm working with here, what you'd want to do is make sure that you just pounce and don't do the circular motion. And that's only if you've got a lot of texture. And get just a little bit more zinc in this area. But we're working on a flat surface today, so I can use this dry brush circular technique to get my effect. Okay, now comes the fun part when we take the stencil off and see what happens. There, nice. This would be a great stencil for a bathroom. So you can get that effect. You've got a little bit of shimmer from the crowning touch. The light catches it and plays over it. And because it has that nice thick quality, the one color went right into the other one without having any lines. It's lovely stuff.